you. So I'll go ahead and call to order the June 9th Forest Resilience Task Force meeting for Whatcom County, 11:02 a.m. Thanks for folks who could make it. I'll go ahead and I guess we've established that we are one member away from hitting the quorum, so we're operating without a quorum currently. We'll tackle any approval items once we get there. Looking at the agenda, are there any changes or requests related to the agenda? Now we'll go ahead and proceed. So we've got approved the May 12th meeting summary, so we'll hold off on voting on that, but just for tackling it, were there any edits or comments on the meeting summary as written?
Yes, I have some.
Go ahead, Oliver.
Okay, let's see. A couple items under updates and announcements on the Lake Whatcom Forest Management Plan says that more public engagement sessions are scheduled, and I was wondering, was it announced when those sessions are scheduled for, or is it just kind of hanging?
I don't think we announced any other ones. I'm not sure that future dates have been scheduled beyond that initial one, but I have not checked in on that website recently.
Okay, on public comment, Chris Elder responding to Alan Chapman's comment, and Chris Elder, whoever he is, responded that the task force is focusing primarily on forests within Whatcom County jurisdiction. And I understand that, but I always thought we were saying that really this plan focuses on all forest lands within Whatcom County. However, recognizing that some of the recommended measures and actions, aren't applicable to non-county jurisdictions. I don't know if that clarification was made, but anyway, I was always under the impression that that the plan focuses primarily on all county forests, but knowing that there's a difference between county-owned forests and other forests in Whatcom County.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just respond briefly. I think I'm open to a slight modification of that. I think I tried to frame my response just remembering as such, and I agree that the plan is largely tackling all forests in the county, but just recognizing that we really only have authority over things within the county jurisdiction.
Right. And then on the next page where it says Melanie also indicated that, and I think it's Triangle Associates, not associations.
Great. Any other comments on the meeting notes? Go ahead, Brandy.
Oh, I just wanted not to, I'm not recommending changes. I just want to point out that I think that there was either a disconnect or a nuance in the minutes that's missing in terms of what the subcommittees worked on. So I just want to point out that the strict, sort of like interpretation of the next steps list, et cetera, is not really what was done at the subcommittee level. Like it was a little bit differently nuanced than that. So for whatever it's worth, there's a little bit of a disconnect there that I just want to point out.
Do you think it's worth calling out that nuance or modifying some statement?
Was that question for me, Chris?
Yeah, whether or not
what I think is that we can just reflect in the minutes where that disconnect ends up, surfacing in the reports that we give and the discussions that we have. I think that's okay. Because if I can't say that the conversation that's represented in the minutes is inaccurate with regards to the takeaway message that people took from the meeting, right? Like I just know that there's a way that we did things that's not just totally in a one-to-one alignment with what was stated in the minutes. So I think we can cover it by just, in the new minutes, right? Reflecting what we discussed here today. I don't know that you have to make changes in last month's minutes.
Okay, well, I think we are at a quorum now. We got George has joined us, so I guess, it seems like Oliver had two edits. One was changing, I think it was Triangle Associations to Triangle Associates, and then just trying to provide a little bit more detail on my response to Alan Chapman under public comment. So with those two minor edits, I'd love a motion to adopt as written. Steven, go ahead. Is that a motion?
I can move if nobody else has moved.
Thanks, Brandy. Anybody want to second that?
I'll second. This is Carl.
Carl? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
I
Bunch of thumbs ups.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so minutes are approved unanimously. We will move on to updates and announcements. Maybe I'll kick it to you first, Melanie, if you have any updates for the task force.
Nothing from me that's not on the agenda.
Okay. I think related to Whatcom County forestry stuff, I guess the one update I can provide, Chairwoman Rosemary LeClaire from the Nooksack tribe sent a letter to County Executive Seth Balsadoo regarding engagement and next steps on the Stewart Mountain Community Forest. Seth Ball just responded to the chairwoman this past week. So myself and other county staff will be meeting with Nooksack tribal staff and Whatcom Land Trust staff within the next week or two to try to make sure we're all on the same page with next steps for the Stewart Mountain Community Forest Phase 2. Just a quick reminder that the Phase 2 acreage is a little over 1,600 acres and kind of goes from Jones Creek, just immediately south of Acme, north up to Hardscrabble Falls. But that's hopefully going to move forward. It's been an interesting process figuring out governance and ownership, and I think we're hoping to have a presentation to County Council after we get some confirmation that all parties are on the same page. Go ahead, George.
Did they send a date?
A date for that meeting?
Yeah.
No, Seth Ball just responded on Friday, so I'll probably take the lead, work with Alex Jeffers and Maggie on your end to try to get that meeting set up in the next week or two.
Could you include me in the communications?
Yep, will do.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any updates from task force members that you'd like to share with the full group? Okay. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and move us on to the public comment period. I can't see the waiting room and we don't have any public in person. Melanie, anyone want to raise their hand if they'd like to speak?
Yes, we have one participant, and then after this, Brandy, I'll go back to the agenda, if that's okay. Is that okay to do public comment first?
I don't have a problem with it. I just wanted to
Okay.
say that in terms of Robert's Rules of Order, we still have to approve the agenda.
Yeah, I think Chris asked for any questions or comments, but I think we've had some folks join since then, so we'll go back to that. Okay, we have Kaya. Go ahead. Let me give you permission.
Awesome. Thanks, Melanie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kai Hayes. I'm the Land and Water Policy Manager for Resources. We're a Whatcom-based environmental nonprofit, and we have an interest in building climate resilience for our region, particularly through natural climate solutions that restore and enhance watershed health. And I wanted to start by thanking you all for your continued efforts to put together a forest resilience plan for the county and for your commitment to return to the table and navigate some of the challenges of a process, that strives to incorporate so many important perspectives. And we're really looking forward to seeing the draft plan when it becomes available for public review and comment. One thing we're also really invested in is just the legacy of the plan after its approval and adoption by the county. And thinking about the Forest Advisory Committee as one of the most likely bodies to oversee conversations about implementation of the plan. And we feel that the group's increasingly prepared to do so successfully with the expansion of the committee to include additional seats and perspectives that are represented here on the task force, including opportunities for both of the tribes, the federal forest managers, and some of our non-governmental land managers like the Land Trust to be a part of those conversations. I wanted to point out, though, that at this month's FAC meeting, the group had a chance to take an initial look at the draft and think about how to craft feedback for the task force. And they also deliberated on the best means to engage with the plan, given some current limitations on capacity. It sounds like both of the FAC reps are going to have to withdraw from the task force for capacity reasons. And because that perspective is such an important one to have represented in the development of the plan, and to have some successful buy-in and support for implementation long-term, I think it's crucial that their expertise and understanding of local infrastructure inform the final version of the recommendations explored in the plan. So in absence of FAC rep presence on the task force, I'd just like to encourage subcommittee groups to consider how they might engage FAC members or the committee as a whole in some of their conversations and in some of those meetings. To ensure that those perspectives are integrated and really set the plan up for the best possible outcome in terms of implementation moving forward. And just a quick note on the Lake Whatcom Forest Management Plan, there are some updated public tour dates for June 18th and July 16th on the Engage Bellingham website if folks are interested in checking those out more. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Super helpful. Yeah, I was trying to look at the county's Lake Whatcom Forest Management Plan webpage, and they don't have those dates on there yet. And see if we can get that crosswalk from the Engage Bellingham page. And regarding the Forest Advisory Committee, actually, I just saw that email this morning and reached out to Tracy and Corey and have not had a chance to connect with them yet. So it's just also news to me that I got in my inbox. But I agree with the intent of what you were just saying, Kaya, and I think we need to find some way to make sure we're still connecting with the industry folks. Okay, well, thanks for that comment. And I guess going back to Brandy's comment, I mean, Brandy, I don't think we're required by Robert's rules to approve the agenda, which is where we kind of modified that in the agenda itself, just to review the agenda. If there's any comments, certainly we're open to modification, but I don't think we're beholden to approve the agenda per se.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll move on to our first substantive agenda item, which is review the work plan schedule. So I'll pass it over to you, Melanie.
Thank you. Sorry, I was covering up my mute button. Well, hi folks, good to see you all again. We have the work plan schedule in your packet. It's slightly more condensed, so it should be a little bit easier to see, but I'll also share it on the screen in the Excel format so that we can zoom in slightly. And just let me know when it's showing up for you folks on the screen. Sometimes Excel takes a minute. Thumbs up. Thank you, Abe. Okay, so we are in the week of June 9th, and just highlighting a few milestones here. Let me scoot back a little bit. So we're here at our monthly task force meeting, and what we are hoping to do prior to next week is to have a updated consolidated objectives goals and objectives, and you've all made great progress on actions as well, and then to also be categorizing those critical threats. And so we've got Dave's in the meeting today, and we're going to have a lot of focused conversation on the path forward for that. In terms of the contents of the plan, we have the goal of incorporating those objectives and critical threats and actions into the plan so that you can all review them in the context of the plan the weeks of June 23rd and have that review completed by the end of the month here in June 30th. And so the next focus of the plan is really on those objectives and actions and critical threats. There's also a couple of sections that, new sections of the plan that will be circulating for review. And those are the collaborative framework section, which you have all taken a look at already. And so this will be the secondary review of that section. And then near-term recommendations and next steps, and finally an executive summary. So these will be short summary sections of the plan, and this will be the first time that you're seeing those sections of the plan. Any questions, Oliver?
Yeah, I may be getting ahead of us, but in reviewing the packet, I noticed that there is a council presentation on July 22nd
Mm-hmm.
for the plan, but yet our review is identified in the packet as being done by August 11th.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't the task force really vote on the plan prior to presenting to council in case there's major disagreement?
The idea for the council update is that they, part of that update, and yes, that is on the agenda to discuss later on, but I'm happy to respond to the timing of it, is that this is, we'll let them know where we're at in the process, that there's still one more round of review, but that the idea is to give them a short, condensed 10-minute update on the current status of the plan, recognizing that it's going to have the final motion for approval in August. The idea is that council also has the opportunity to share any insights and suggestions prior to task force motion for approval. Yeah, Carl?
Yeah, I don't see it on the plan, but maybe it's there somewhere. And Kaya just raised the idea of a public review and comment period. Is such a thing built in, and are we going to be able to see public comments before we actually vote on the plan?
That is not built into the process.
So there won't be, or the council may choose to do a public comment afterwards.
There will not be as part of, yeah, there's not part of this process. If that is something that happens afterwards, that would be outside of the scope of this group and of Triangle. The public input portion that we developed was the earlier on to feed the portions of the plan, so the public survey.
Seems like that's somewhat problematic, especially if we're losing our FAC members who actually bring some of that forestry expertise to us, that we're not going to get to hear from anybody that's not part of the task force before we vote. That's just me personally thinking that, but I don't know how we fit it in our timeline because we're pretty constrained.
Good comment, Carl. Maybe you and me and Melanie connect after this meeting to see what opportunities we might have. I don't have a silver bullet at the moment, but I agree, especially with loss of industry representation. We should consider how to check it a little bit with the community. Go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, also, update on Forest Advisory Committee review. Has that review occurred? And if so, I don't recall seeing or being informed on what their comments might be.
I'm going to talk about that right after this, Oliver, if that's okay.
That's great, thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, just in respect of what Carl said, it seems like we may be inviting some unnecessary trouble if we don't have some sort of public comment. I can just see, this unelected group has decided policy for the county without any input from any of our citizens and blah, 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 all over the local press and the local internet. It's just saying that this maybe it's worth the risk of staying on schedule, but it seems to me that it is a risk.
We had, just to follow up on that, yeah, I think Carl and myself and Melanie we'll try to chat through that and see how we can accommodate that, because I agree, it's not gonna, yeah, it's a good thing to talk more about. Hey, Brandy.
The one thing that has been coming up in many subcommittee conversations over the last several months is whether or not there's any flexibility on the deadline to transmit a final plan to council. And mainly it's because at the subcommittee level, the work that we're doing is so crucial to the actual construction of the plan. And we're getting the work done, but we're finding it in general, we're finding it challenging to plug and play in the process. And so it's taking us longer to plug and play. We're not just super efficient and fast on plugging and playing with this process. So I think that the one comment that I have about this is that this schedule is just, I said, sort of like elevating the question, can we engage with council around the possibility that if we need another month or something like that, that we have it so that we can really do the work that needs to be done in looping back with subcommittees or the task force on, how work is being represented in the plan, if there's any questions, whether or not there's additional modifications. It just feels to me that a little more time, if we need it and could get it, I guess for lack of a better term, permission to do it, it would be great to bring that forward in our next presentation to council and just let them know that we're possibly at that time, we will still know that we're a little behind the 8 ball, which I think we are a little behind still in terms of the expectations of where we're supposed to be at today.
Yeah, I hear that, Brandy. I think that's kind of almost similarly related to the previous discussion item. So let me try to get maybe Carl and Melanie's heads together to try to tackle those questions, because I think they are somewhat related, moving us to a final work product. Anything else on your end, Mel?
If there are no other questions on that timeline, and those are all great comments and thoughts, so thank you. We can spend a little bit of time talking about the FAQ, and I'm happy to respond to any questions. I just mostly wanted to share with folks that we are sorting out what makes sense in terms of a review timeline and getting really robust participation and review and insights from the FAQ. And what we're doing is we're trying to balance sharing the most up-to-date information that we have and allowing the group enough time to review, as well as enough time for this group to see and react to comments, as you noted, Oliver. And we're in a little bit of a pinch, as you've all noted. We are now down to our final 2 review cycles, and that's the challenge that we're up against and what we're trying to do to be creative. So what we're hoping is that the FAQ is able to review the sections that you all have now completed 2 rounds of review on, and then share the most up-to-date information that we have, that is still in flux, which would be the objectives and actions and critical threats, in as complete a state as we are able to, while still allowing for time to adequately react to any comments and suggestions that they have and give you all enough time to see it again. So that's where we're at. And I think follow-up conversations are needed between myself and Chris and Brandy as someone who is both on the FAC and on this task force, and with some folks from the FAC to figure out what the best path forward is. So that's where things stand. We still need to, as Chris noted, we received the information that our FAC representatives would no longer be serving on the task force just late last week. So we're working to react to that and adjust.
And I might have tuned out there for a second, Melanie, but if you say that the FAC is getting us their comments back within 3 weeks?
That's the schedule that we were, yeah, that works for the FAC. I think we need to now, they had a draft and I think that they didn't review it. So we need to go back and see if that timeline might be shifting.
Great.
Yeah, Jen?
Yeah, I was just curious what version was shared with that group, knowing that we kind of adjusted a lot of things last minute to like a week ago.
Yeah, they have everything, all of the sections of the plan that have not been in flux, so not the objectives, actions, critical threats. Those, our recommendation was, I think our recommendation will be for them to review the rest of the plan, as that has already undergone the 2 review cycles, and then share the updated objectives and actions and threats that you've all been working on after we discuss where things are at today at the end of this meeting. So hoping that we can give them a more up-to-date draft after our discussion today, or shortly after our discussion today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Brandy?
A couple of things to make sure that everybody's on the same page. The FAC did try to review the April version of the plan. However, the work that they, the time that they had, the work that they were able to complete before the meeting was limited in terms of the amount of time that they had to actually review the plan outside of the FAC meeting before coming into the FAC meeting to discuss what they had reviewed. And so my understanding is that staff to the FAC will be trying to collate comments and recommendations for transmittal to the Forest Resilience Task Force. And so then that being said, just so that, you know, Dave, you and Triangle, you guys are prepared that there's a lot of questions about the data that's in the background section. A lot of disagreement with individual local knowledge with the data that's presented there. And so there's a need to do some help the FAC understand where the data is coming from, like with footnotes or a bibliography or something. I don't know. So just know that, like, I'm not saying that that's what you're going to actually get from Alex, but that's one of the main things that came out of that conversation was people trying to understand where did the data come from, you know, how many acres of this and how much % of that and what's the land base. That's like where they were at, is really picking apart that level of detail and giving you some feedback that way. And then can you just remind me, so that's just what I wanted to say, and that I just wanted to ask, can you just remind me for my benefit, since we're talking about framing the work that's being shared out with other stakeholders as the work that's been reviewed twice by the Forest Resilience Task Force, which sections are we at right now that have been reviewed by this whole group in a meeting, and we know that it's like gone through the two iterations?
The sections that have been through 2 review cycles are the background section, the description of forest assets, the policy review, and the community values section.
Yeah. So that's great. Thanks for that clarification.
Mhm.
And I just would share that it's probably more constructive to send to find a way to send the current version of the whole collated plan, but also showing which sections you want the FAC to focus on because they've been baked through the 2 review step process. That threw them into a little bit of a tailspin because things were pretty rough in the objectives, and actions section. And as we know, it's because we're still working on it. And it felt to them a little bit like, for those who did try to rush to review everything before going into the FAC meeting, it felt like they were wasting their time working on something that really wasn't, for the most part, baked for them to look at.
Thanks, Brandy. Yeah, I think yeah, I'd like to connect after this and just think about what makes sense moving forward.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say all this out loud so that everybody else could understand sort of like, this
Yeah.
conversation has been going on for the last week to week and a half.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Really helpful. Any other thoughts or questions? Ideas? All right. Well, we're about 10 minutes off schedule. I think that's probably okay. I think we'll just, keep rolling through. What I'd love to do is hear from folks from the consolidation subcommittee. So, Jen, Brandy, Tom, who's not able to be here with us, Oliver and Ellen. I know you all had a chance to meet last week and talk about ideas for reducing some redundancies, and would just love to hear any outcomes from that conversation and recommendations.
Yeah, I can jump in, and everybody else that was there, feel free and jump in anything I missed or edit. We were able to meet last week. I think a lot of people were changing up their objectives and or actions up until last minute, so that made it a little bit more difficult, including my own subcommittee. Totally, for sure. But we also didn't have travel representation at our subcommittee, so we wanted to make sure that we had that with changing the objectives and actions to be able to send those final notes. For the consolidation subcommittee, it was still hard to put something together if we don't know what the end goal really looks like. That was kind of the one key missing piece that we didn't have yet. And Melanie, I did look at like the latest review, and it looks like it might just be listing out all of the goals. So there's still some clarity around, is it all of the goals listed and then under actions under the final plan? Or is that just how we're working through the process? Particularly, and I'll kind of share a couple of examples of the why, is it's kind of hard to consolidate if we're not sure if all of the goals are going to be listed out. If they are, then it's pretty easy. There are a couple of goal statements that are similar, but the action items are different. Same as vice versa. A couple of the action items are different, but they're accomplishing different objectives. And we could easily flag those, but without kind of knowing what it looks like at the end, we can't really provide recommendations yet. Brandy or Ellen, is there anything that you would like to add? Or Oliver, sorry. Oliver was there.
I'll add a few things. The climate informed subcommittee had several recommendations that I can go through. For example, one of our objectives was to promote an innovative wood products industry, and we felt that should really go under goal 1 of the forest industry and economics, and those actions should follow there. As far as, let's see, going down on the climate informed management, on the first draft goal, action 2, since there is a well, I numbered the goals 1 through 14 just to make it easier, but I know Triangle hasn't done that. So I'll try to explain this as easily as possible, but on action 2, use available advanced modeling techniques that include climate to identify areas of high risk of wildfire initiation and or spread. And then we added another sentence to that, provide results to landowners and wildfire emergency response agencies for management and planning. That was an intent to tie it in with goal 10, which is the goal that talks about wildland fire management entities, objective B action 2. Anyway, it's kind of hard if you don't have these numbered correctly. Also, we suggested moving action 3, require use of wildland urban interface, WUI international building codes, and adopt firewise practices for communities at risk, also under goal 10 of that same objective A. Again, just it made more sense to go under there. Let's see, other things. We did acknowledge that there is under our draft goal 2 under climate informed, which I've numbered number 5, Whatcom County forests enhance watershed level ecological resilience to climate change. Action 4, monetize increased summer stream flows. That also occurs twice in forest industry and economics. Their goal 3, objective F, and action 4, and objective D, action 1. And I know that probably came from Oliver. And so I just asked him the question of where does he think it fits best? Because it probably only needs to be in one place. And then there were some wording changes that on another action item that the climate informed will probably have to discuss at one of our subcommittee meetings. But those were some of the things that we felt needed to be moved around just to make a little bit more sense. As far as we had some discussion as far as the repetition of goals. Well, let me go down to like goal 14, the last goal under stewardship and land use is duplicated under forest management coordination, and whether those objectives could be moved. And the discussion was, again, the question we asked last month and was never answered is how are these going to be discussed and implemented? If they're going to be discussed as separate categories and implemented as separate categories, then at least one member of our consolidation committee felt that that it needed to be in this forest stewardship because the people in the forest coordination wouldn't have the expertise or priorities that are in forest stewardship. So it'd be a more stovepipe bureaucracy where you have these 4 committees doing their own thing. Anyway, it comes back to the overall, how is this task resilience plan going to be implemented in the end? And that was the question. And so there was some reluctance to move that or move those objectives under the other one. And maybe that's a discussion for the task force, or maybe that's something that, I don't know, if Dave Peterson is writing the actual plan, maybe that's a question for him. And I guess I've talked enough.
Thank you, Ellen.
Mhm.
Jim, you have your hand up, and then Jen, and then Brandy. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi, first I have to admit that when in my formal education, I got stuck on calculus. And I think the problem here is we've turned something that should be an algebra exercise into a calculus exercise. And it starts at the goals. And I'm broken record here. There's no reason to have 14 goals. That is a violation of the goals and objectives process. And what happened is we should have maybe 3 goals. Most of our goals are actually objectives. So how this would fall into line as an algebra exercise, it would still be a lot of work, but as if the committee could have maybe 3 to 5 actual goals and then group the faux goals under those as objectives and then look for redundancy and equivalency between the existing objectives and the ones that have been demoted to objectives. And once that's sorted out, then we can arrange the action steps. And I think if this needs to be done, if this is going to be a usable document for policymakers. The whole idea of subcommittees having discrete goals is contrary to the whole concept. We should have the goals should be global, and the objective should be subcommittee linked. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks. I wanted to clarify, Ellen was using the word "we" a lot as far as recommendations. I think that was the Climate Informed Subcommittee. Just to clarify from the Consolidation Subcommittee, we have 0 recommendations at this point and really focused around a lot of more questions to be able to kind of do some of that work. But also kind of to Ellen's point too is, as far as the consolidation piece, not knowing kind of that end goal, we can't really redraft things without being able to work with the subcommittees that actually drafted those goals. And so I think the missing piece for it all for us is really, we've been working in these 4 separate subcommittees and we haven't done the consolidating together as a group to make sure nothing is being missed. Which makes it really hard as kind of an additional subcommittee without that work to be able to figure out where should be consolidated, what is being redundant in there, because it is parsed out into 14 different goals, lots of different objectives. Brandy, I think you're next.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead, Brandy.
Yeah, so thanks for that clarification, Jen, and thanks, Ellen. I want to say that if I think that I agree that a work group trying to cross all the work of the subcommittees is a little bit challenging in the absence of really understanding how this content is going to be structured in the plan. So Dave and Melanie and Kate, if we could get some clear indication from you about how the goals and objectives and actions and threats are going to be structured in the plan, we can do a better job of getting you information in in completing our work in a timely manner. I'm repeating what's already been said. Those are my words. I'd love to hear that here in this space, that everybody hears it and takes that understanding back to the work that they're doing at the subcommittee level. I don't know if that's possible. And then I guess just to that end, I did share the King County Rural Forest Commission strategic plan for conserving and forests in King County. And there's a structure there that I think is a very good structure. I'm not saying that we should use that structure in this plan, but giving us something that really helps us understand how to take the assignments that you're giving us and think about them in terms of the actual structure would help us, would help the work group that is consolidating on behalf of the entire group, and would help the subcommittees continue to do the work that they are taking on to complete. And then I guess just to Jen's point about, can we come together as a larger group? That's been brought up before. I think Noah brought that up before, that, being able to have a conversation where we have a work session where we can really do that work together as a task force. If we can't do that, then we just have to have these other really clear, guideposts and structure to plug into so that we can make sure that we're holding ourselves, and doing our work in a way that will, yield the results that everybody is hoping that will yield. So I don't know if Dave can speak, or if you have something to share, but like right now, just case in point is that the current plan lists all the goals and actions, objectives and actions by subcommittee. If that's where we're going, then there will be goal redundancy and objective redundancy, because there will be nuances from one subcommittee to the next, how they're emphasizing things. Whereas if we have a list of goals and associated, like that isn't broken out by subcommittee, we can do other stuff with the consolidation and making sure that all the nuances are being represented and not lost in the consolidation process. And I see Dave has a hand up, so I'm assuming he's going to respond to me, and I'll put my hand down.
Thanks, Brandy. Steve, Ellen, are you okay if Dave responds to some of the questions and then go back to you, or would you like to ask your question first?
I think I'd rather hold my place.
Okay. All right. Keep your hand up. Yeah, Dave, go right ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now? All right,
Loud
very
and
good.
clear.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for the comments. I think, what I hear everybody saying is we may need a more parsimonious approach to this, and maybe to all components of the plan, so that, number one, it's clear, number two, it's consistent, number three, it can be communicated to a broad range of users and readers of the plan in the future, so there's no, misconceptions or whatever. So I think that's number one, is more parsimonious approach to it. And I think probably need a common vision of what the different categories mean, goals, objectives, and so forth, actions. There are other kinds of terminologies that may or may not be more comfortable for you all, but I think that, having them set up as kind of a hierarchy where the goals tier to objectives, objectives tier to actions is clear. And I do think it would be helpful if the redundancies could be reduced somehow. I'm not sure how you do that without a kind of a full member participation, unless you trust somebody to maybe just do that reorganization on their own. But I really think that would help things. Also, it will help do this now, at least relatively soon, so that section can then tier to the threats section and what's in that one as well. So we have similar terminologies, similar types of framing and context, and then it's clear how those two sections of the plan are connected, because I think those are the ones that most people will read and jump to. They may skip over the rest of it, but those are pretty critical to get those right and have them clear. And I'm more than happy to work on some of that, but I think we need the various subcommittees to agree on what they want, first of all, in the goals and objectives.
Dave, thanks for that. Sorry, can I just do a little bit of back and forth here? Do I have permission? Thank you. Thanks for that. One thing that some of the subcommittees tried to do is they tried to write purpose statements for the subcommittee, and they also tried to write ultimately what they were trying to get at with a goal, so that some of the subcommittees did, following a goal, say, this is what we're really trying to get at here, and that to set the stage for why we were saying certain actions and certain objectives. So I don't know how helpful that would be, but like something like that helps us do the work that you need us to do for you, is I think what's really been missing, meaning that we're all coming up with different versions of what that narrative is in our subcommittees, and they aren't all aligning necessarily across subcommittees. And if there's, you know, a few people who are sitting on many subcommittees, they might be trying to create some consistency that way, or to influence for consistency, or you know, whatever, but they're one voice, right? Like, so it would be, I think that, like, so I love what I hear you saying, and I'm not sure how we get to it, but I think if we can get there, that would be really helpful. Especially if we're going to continue to be in this sort of like distributed workflow model, right? Where, yeah. And maybe you know, if we need extra time and we get permission from the council, maybe the thing that we really need to do is we need to have a work session where we can all sit down for a chunk of time with the rough draft to really go from beginning to end and really, you know, identify where things are wonky and not aligning or unclear or redundant or whatever.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to put a straw man out there, you know, contingent on what Melanie and Kate might think about that approach, you know, and subject to your comments and revisions of what that might be. But I think it did appear, Brandy, you know, when I was looking at it, that maybe the different subcommittees had a different conceptual vision of what was expected. And so I think that may be part of our issue here.
Yeah, I don't know what everybody else would say, but from my perspective, I think that's a spot on statement.
Okay, can I go ahead?
Go ahead, Steve, jump in.
Yeah. I think I totally agree with Jim and Dave that as it is right now, it's too much redundancy and too long and too inconsistent. And I think maybe the consolidation group, and I appreciate this, the reason why they're doing this, but they're being too timid and deferring to the subcommittees rather than sort of taking the bull by the horns and putting this into a coherent list here. And I think maybe the thing that we need to think is that the subcommittees are means, not ends. In other words, the subcommittees are ways to divide the questions that we're addressing with regard to forest resiliency into, you know, various sub areas of that, and they're to make suggestions. But the purpose of the plan is not to forward what the subcommittees say. The purpose of the plan is to forward what the task force says. And so that I would propose that the work of the subcommittees, aside from the critical threats, the work of the subcommittees pretty soon ought to be done. And we should move to a phase of consolidation. Now, exactly what structure, you know, who works on what aspects of consolidation, we may need to discuss, because the consolidation committee would otherwise have a hell of a lot of stuff to do. It might be more on their time than they were, you know, willing or able to give. But I think we're sort of, we're worshiping the subcommittees a little bit too much. I say this as a person who has basically organized the work of two subcommittees, so I'm not anti-subcommittee. But I think the subcommittee phase may be close to over once they get their critical threats done. And the task of the task force is not to put in more suggestions from more subcommittees, but to consolidate what's already there. And then, of course, give everybody opportunity for review, and so people don't feel left out. Maybe that's too radical a suggestion, but I think it goes along with what both Dave and Jim have indicated as what the format of a final report that people would look at would be like. I don't know, maybe this is too radical, but here I am.
Okay, I'll go next. I totally agree with Steve and also with Jim. I think probably 3 to 6 goals is maximum on for this task force. And having worked on a lot of strategic plans in the past, it's always easier if a group has a straw man to start with. And I would even suggest if Jim and Dave were to get together and put in a straw man of a goal around certain areas, because I mean, it doesn't make sense that we have, 3 or all 4 subcommittees having a goal on ecosystems. We should really, we do need to take the bull by the horns, as Steve said, and not be timid about this. And so I totally agree. That's how we should proceed. Get a straw man together and put some potential goals, and then let's work them. I think the subcommittees, like you said, Steve, we still need some of the critical threats, but we also need some of the actions. Some of the actions were missing, and it was hard to understand what the objectives were for. So some of the actions also need to be filled in if people want to keep those objectives. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Yeah, I want to ask Ellen a question then. Can the consolidation committee sort of put out a list of what's missing from the subcommittees so the subcommittees can focus their work fairly quickly so that those holes are filled in?
Well, I think you can just look at the consolidated lists that Triangle sent us, and there's obviously objectives in some cases with no actions under them. So that was partly what was missing, and trying to understand what the objective was trying to get at. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks.
But maybe it's a moot point if Dave and Jim can just put some goals together, maybe those objectives will no longer be relevant.
Go ahead, Jim, hop in.
Well, I was trying to avoid more work in my life, but as I have to put my money where my mouth is, if Dave would be willing to get together on this, so would I. But it seems like if we have discrete goals and non-redundant objectives, under those goals, we can go back to see where those objectives derived from, and then assign one or another committee to work out the action steps relating to those objectives. I know we have multiple committees coming up with the same objectives. Maybe we give multiple committees a chance to create actions related to those objectives as well.
Go ahead, Brandy.
Yeah, so it sounds like from some of the people that have spoken that work on a straw man structure is agreed upon to be beneficial. And, it's fine that we have what we have. It would have been great if we maybe unpacked this earlier and got that sooner, but I think it's definitely important to get it. And it sounds like maybe there's a question about how best to do that. And I don't know what Dave is available to do. However, I assume, Dave, that you've been operating under a certain sort of presumption about structure. And if you have, even just getting that, from you would just provide a lot of guidance to everyone to continue to finish their work. And I do think that the subcommittees are probably pretty close to being done, but we just haven't, I think that this work that we did this last couple of weeks, well, the last couple of weeks of May, really focused on refining the objectives. And you see that there aren't actions under some objectives because the subcommittees were thinking they were going to be able to come back together and continue to work on actions as well as threats. But I think that everybody is focused on baking those actions and those threats for all of the stuff that they put forward so far. I think that if we got a structure to plug into, we could do that work at the subcommittee level, and the consolidation work group could probably do what it needed to do in terms of consolidating. And that might be the lowest lift for you, Triangle and Dave, given what you have you know, what you've already set up for yourselves versus how far you can, you know, like adaptively manage with, you know, what you've been contracted to do and what you have time to do.
Yeah, I think if the subcommittees could say, okay, we're done, that would be the trigger that says, okay, I can work on that and Jim can work on that or whoever else might be interested. And then trim things down a bit, put it into a consistent format, and then we could identify some places where it might need additional input from the subcommittees, whether it be the actions or to take maybe a long paragraph and make it into a shorter paragraph or something that's more consistent with a predetermined structure. But that's all doable. That's editing.
Thanks, Dave. Russ?
Yeah, I think in addition to the things we've talked about, wrapping up the subcommittee's work, such as threats, I think the other valuable role for the subcommittees is in our final steps of review. I think rather than having just each of us individually review, I think we come up with more consolidated and precise review if we use the subcommittees in the review process also.
Thanks for that suggestion, Russ. I think that's a great one. Well, on that note of critical threats, I think that's where we wanted to go next. Steve, I see your hand.
Just very quickly, a question, is the goals, objectives, and actions, is that going to constitute a big chunk of the report, a separate chunk of the report? Is that how it's going to feature?
A big piece of the report, yes. Can you clarify what you mean by separate?
Well, I mean, we have forest description of assets, public process, those things. It's going to be a section comparable to those.
Correct. And I
Okay.
think, yeah, and Dave can speak more if you want, Dave, on just any additional details of the organization, but I think that's what we're sorting out right now. But it would be, as opposed to maybe woven in, is what you're getting at, it would be discrete, its own section.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, Brandy?
So if you're moving on to threats, I just have one more thing to say about this part of the conversation.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to kind of wrap us and
okay.
Yeah, but
okay, well, why
go
don't you
ahead.
wrap and then I'll see if I still have
Okay. I'll do my best. I'm just going to kind of reflect on what I'm hearing and what seems confirm the alignment that I think is emerging. So I'm hearing that folks would like, since this the term we've been using is a straw man, of the layout of the goals and objectives and actions, so that it's easier for this consolidation and reorganization to occur. And Dave is willing to spend some time on this, as is Jim. And that then would get circulated, and I think this is what I want to confirm with folks is, does the consolidation committee still feel like they're up to this task of wrangling with this straw man? And if so, is this something that the group? Yeah, go ahead, Ellen. I see a response.
Well, I just wonder if the whole committee should wrangle with the straw man.
The whole consolidation committee or all of the subcommittees?
No, yeah, all of the subcommittees. In a task force meeting, we should get together and look at the straw man and say, or make some recommendations, a review ahead of time of those suggested straw man goals on how we might improve them, and say yes, and then these things would fit under it. Is that what you're saying, or?
I'm curious what other folks' impressions were of what feels best for the next step. Go ahead, Jen.
Figured I'd still raise my hand, get in line. I think what's kind of missing. I mean, the hard part about the consolidation subcommittee is if we're making our own kind of personal opinions of this feels redundant, but without being able to check in with the subcommittee to see if it actually is or if it needs to be separated. And maybe it just needs to be rewritten so it's more detailed. I think it would be really helpful to have everybody together to confirm that those things, as Ellen was kind of speaking to. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from a lot of different pieces is, yeah, we can have a couple of people push things forward, but what's really needed is everybody together to confirm instead of kind of delegating a couple of people to make those decisions for everybody else.
Thanks, Jen. Russ, and then Brandy.
Yeah, I think from a point of efficiency, I think starting with Dave and Jim making a straw man structure, and then if the consolidation committee is willing to engage with that straw man, go there next, and then bring it back to our group as a whole, because I think our timing is such between our whole group meetings that I think we would move the process along faster if we did that format rather than just waiting for our next whole group meeting. I think it would put us behind further to get some of those initial discussions. And then the straw man, if committees met, if subcommittees met, that could be something, and we have a straw man structure ready for them to at least do preliminary review of that. That could be another part of the review process. Because I think some of that, most of that actually could happen prior to our next whole group meeting.
Can I say something first, Brandy? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just kind of
Yes.
about the timeline. We have one more full task force meeting before the motion for approval in August. And I know we've talked about possibilities for an extension, but based on other approvals that we've sought, I'm not very optimistic, and I wouldn't want to rely on that as we're thinking about next steps. And how to phrase this? This is a tough position to be in, to be the one who's controlling the timeline associated with this, and someone who firmly believes in moving at the speed that the group needs to find alignment and agreement. And I find myself torn, stretched, I guess, across those two things so frequently. And so I'm just sharing like what I'm feeling, right? And the tension that I'm experiencing, because as I hear this need for this group to have dedicated time to work together and be together, and I totally understand that. And my tension is then looking at the things that we're on the hook for, me, like kind of not me, but my team, like very specifically on the hook for, and I just really want to find a way to get there. Jim, I'm not sure if that's reference to.
That means you've made your point.
Okay.
And we should go on.
All right, go ahead, Brandy.
Yeah, thank you. So I would just like to be included in the conversation about the straw man with Dave and whoever else wants to join him. And that's really the main thing I want to say. I don't have any objections to the other parts of your summary. And I'm open to doing this however you think it can be achieved within the limits of your contract. And then I would just put to Chris that it would be really great if we could do some behind the scenes work, canvassing a few council members or staff or somebody about whether or not there's a will to give us a little more time so that we can complete this process with within limits, right? More time within limits.
Go ahead, Jim, and then Ellen.
If we want to have this included in the product of the comprehensive plan update, sooner is much better. Council may want the forestry committee to take a look at it before they review. The relevant chapters will be coming up fairly quickly, July and August for Planning Commission that I'm on. So I would say already done would be better if we want to see it have an impact on the comprehensive plan.
Go ahead, Ellen.
I would just say that I think the consolidation committee could take the straw man and make recommendations of what objectives to move under certain goals, under the condition that the consolidation committee does not spend the whole meeting arguing about the straw man. And if we don't do that, then we should be able to get that work done.
Thanks, Ellen. I think Dave and Jim, and I heard Brandy as a volunteer, can work on the straw man as a next step. And then potentially, if the rest of the consolidation committee is in agreement with Ellen, take a look at what's developed and see if there's some opportunity for you all to spend some time on that first before it extends beyond that small group. Are folks feeling okay with that specific timing TBD? I don't want to make any promises in this room right now. I would say the goal would be to have the consolidation committee take a look at something before the end of the month to keep us somewhat on track with our timing. Any major concerns with that as a rough proposal for a path forward? Yeah, Steve?
Another factual question. If there were to be an extension, if this would mean the council appropriating more money for the task force, is that the obstacle?
That would certainly not happen. You all as a body do not sunset until the end of this year. So there is nothing preventing you from existing, I guess, as a body. The deadline for the plan has been specified, and so that would need to shift.
But would it require appropriating more money for a Triangle and for Dave? In other words, revising the scope of work.
Right. That will not happen. So the question would be, can that happen without more money? That would be the question.
Thanks.
Yeah. Oliver?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I have interest in reviewing a straw man draft as well.
Thanks, Oliver. I think the idea is the consolidation committee would be the ones to take the first look at it. So you would be a part of that. Go ahead, Jen.
Super quick, but I'm just kind of hearing lots of multi-steps before our next meeting, which will come very quickly. So I think these groups will need to meet with like this week or next week as the first step to be able to jump in from there to make sure that we can have everything we need in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, Jim, and Brandy would be the first folks. So maybe while the three of you are on this call together and have calendars accessible, perhaps if the rest of the group is okay with us taking just a couple minutes, are there at least some general times, days this week or next?
Would it be functional to complete the agenda and the three of us stay on for a few minutes?
I'm happy to keep the meeting open if that works for.
Does that work for you, Brandy? I see Dave's nodding.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. So we have 15 minutes left. We were going to spend some time talking about critical threats. What I want to do is first, I want to talk about the presentation to council, which is scheduled for July 22nd. And the purpose of this presentation is really to share the key takeaways, the key aspects of the plan with council. The presentation would be no longer than 10 minutes, so it's not running through the plan in great detail. The purpose is really just a high-level summary of the draft and where it's at. So any like final sections that are still in draft, to note that for council. And I wanted to see if there are any volunteers on the call today who would be interested in joining this presentation and helping to present this information to council.
Pardon, is that the evening meeting or one of the daytime meetings?
It's during the day. We don't have the exact time, but it's because it depends on how the agenda plays out. But typically we've planned around, and maybe Kirsten, if Kirsten's in the room, I think around 1 p.m.
What is it, like 1 to 3, maybe somewhere?
1 to 3. Okay. Somewhere in between 1 to 3 on the 22nd.
That's what it was before when we presented the community
Yeah.
study.
Yep, that's right. Brandy, is that a volunteer hand?
Yes.
Thank you.
If you're asking me though to create original content, that might be a challenge, but I'm happy to be there in a support role.
Yeah, no need to generate content. We might just pull you into review if you'd be willing to do that. Any other volunteers? Be nice to have 2, maybe 3. Steve?
Yeah, again, it would be more or less, going over the content and slides and so forth. I don't know if you'd actually want me to speak for a minute or two. I could do that, but it wouldn't be necessary at all.
Thanks, Steve. That's great. Anyone else? I think there's really no limit, and anyone should feel, if you're compelled to join, regardless of whether or not you are speaking. Is there anyone else who's interested in brief presentation? Ellen?
Yeah, I can certainly be there on my calendar, so just let me know if you want me to help in any way.
That's great. Thank you all. I really appreciate that. That's really helpful. With our final 10 minutes, I was hoping, Dave, you could speak a little bit just on your recommendations for how to think about categorizing and maybe reframing the critical threats that the group has been working on. If you can, try to keep it to maybe 5 minutes or less, and then hear any questions or thoughts from the rest of the group before we wrap.
Sure, we can do this quickly, I think. So as we mentioned earlier, the section on critical threats is another critical part of the plan, and so we want to make sure we have good agreement and consistency there as well. And just up front, I would suggest that we not use the word threats, which I consider to be a normative term, and it's very value laden. And if a fire could be a threat to the existence of a forest, but fire is also critical for some species to exist. Bark beetles will kill trees, but woodpeckers love bark beetles and they love dead trees. So I'm just trying to separate out the values from being objective in this case. I would suggest we think about maybe using the term stressors. I realize that has some value laden baggage as well, but maybe not quite as extreme, but maybe someone else has other more neutral words that we could consider there. We can acknowledge up front here that we're talking about negative outcomes. Nothing wrong with that, but they're in human terms, not in other terms. Although, there might be some positive outcomes that could also be possible with changes in climate or changes in other factors. I like the categories ecological and socioeconomic / political are good. I would also like to suggest that maybe we change ecological to biophysical so that it's clear that we're including hydrologic disturbances and geologic disturbances, those sorts of things, air quality, water quality. It's just, we're just arguing about terms here, but I'm just trying to be a little bit more specific and neutral. The informational category that's currently listed, I don't see that as falling under threats or stressors. I see that more as part of a solution pathway. And that I think it's useful, but I think I would break it out into a couple of different categories: information that's needed to understand the stressor and information needed to reduce the stressor, or something like that. Again, I think it's a great idea, but maybe just to parse that out a little bit from the other two categories. So that's all I have on that. Those are just suggestions. The key here is actually the quality of the information that we include in these sections. And I hate arguing over terminology, but I thought I'd suggest that because I thought it would help with the overall framing and communication of issues in the plan.
Go ahead, hop in, Steve, and then Brandy.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I was the one who came up with that categorization in the forest informed, climate informed, forest informed climate management, whatever it is. And we were a little bit uncomfortable also with the word threats, and we thought the word obstacles in terms of obstacles to implementing the plan, and it seems like not so much the biophysical side, but on the information and the socioeconomic side, we were thinking of obstacles in a sense. But are these stressors? Let's say, I'm just making something up, but pressure for more recreational opportunities in areas that might conflict with tribal rights and treaty rights. That's an obstacle to implementing the plan. Is it a stressor? If it is, then I'm fine with just using the word stressors. But I'm just wondering if it encompasses everything. Again, this is a wordsmithing thing. Don't want to spend too much time on it.
Steve, I think it might depend on whether we're framing this in the context of the plan or in terms of the forest systems.
Yes, I agree. And if it's of the forest systems, then that's fine. I think some of the things that we put down are, in a sense, reasons why this might not happen.
Yeah. Okay. We should agree on this up front then, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure where I stand. I mean, but I think I'd like to hear somebody else.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brandy.
Well, I think that this is a really great illustration of how each subcommittee is approaching these assignments a little differently in the absence of some overarching, structural guidance. And a lot of some other subcommittees don't have these sections that, the climate informed forest management subcommittee created, and instead have been trying to list threats by goal or something like that. So I think that the definitions are needed, Dave, and I think it's helpful because I've listened to several subcommittees differ in their interpretation of what is a goal statement and what is an objective statement, et cetera. So I think this is really important. And I don't think that you should apologize for suggesting that having some kind of overarching structure that we can all fall under is somehow it's not overstepping. I think it's going to be useful. And so I can't speak to the actual categories of the climate informed forest management subcommittee that you're referring to, but I do want to say that I do think that threats is, I'll use a different word, it's a loaded term in this context. And I like the idea that you're thinking about something that invites not only like talking about the negative, but also talking about maybe the positive and the forward thinking action. And I think stressors can do that. I don't know that I have anything to offer to the mix to say, well, stressors and or maybe this other term, but I do like where you're going with that. And I think that I would support that change if that's something that the group could, get to yes on.
Climate people use drivers. It's a little bit different from stressors, but I don't know if you throw that into the hat or not.
Just watching the time. Go ahead, Jim and Russ, and then I might need to wrap us up.
Great insights, Dave. I'll just throw out challenges commonly used. And I think that would include reductions of whatever that challenge is, also mitigations for
Jim, I think you oh.
I muted because I stopped.
Oh, got it. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I like the term challenges or obstacles, but I think challenges probably captures the captures more broadly than stressors, and provides its own opportunity for discussion or kind of in a way that will fit the broad areas that we were considering under threats. You know, that the term challenges can be used for just about everything we were talking about, but it's less loaded.
Brandy, then Oliver, then I'll wrap us up briefly.
Sorry, I meant to lower my hand. I did put some synonyms in the chat though for stressors, and challenges is one of them. That one could work too.
Go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, maybe rather than worry about what term is used, it's more important to define the term that is used carefully in the document. But personally, I'm in favor of the term stressor because that's more consistent with what term is used in the climate adaptation technical field.
Thanks, folks. We've got lots for us and Dave to chew on and get back to you on. I wanted to make a quick request in our last minute for some photos that you all might have that might be relevant and useful to add some depth and some beauty to the plan. So I am going to use the existing Google Drive that everybody has access to and make a folder, and I'll share that around via email for you all to upload some images around Whatcom County and forests and that you feel like would be useful and relevant to the plan. We will be sending a lot of follow-up from this meeting related to next steps and focusing on the goal. Based on what we're hearing, some examples and more specific guidance for those sections and the critical threats, probably soon to be renamed challenges or stressors. And we'll share that all with you as soon as we have a path forward. Chris, any final words?
Thanks everyone for sticking with us, and I will follow up on some of the items we discussed earlier, work with Melanie and Carl to see what sort of options we have. But thanks for all the attention. Everyone had a good rest of your day, and we are adjourned.
And I'll hang on with Jim, Dave, and Brandy.